University Radio Exeter, 945 kilohertz, 317 meters. Okay, roaming the deep. This is the Royal Navy's Type 21 frigate HMS Amazon. URE programs have a maritime theme this summer. See page 3. All at sea with URE. Very good. The many faces of URE coming soon. Radio, are we tuned in? Described by the producer-presenter Adrian Pearce as a documentary discussion, in this programme the successes and failures of the current radio scene are discussed by Dave Bowers, Nick Carter, Terence Black and Anthony Massey. Do any of these names ring a bell? Illustrations provided from various other radio stations. Date to be announced. Well, that's no good. Date to be announced. If you're a bit of a night owl, tune into Midnight Magazine, URE's current affairs discussion. That became Agenda, or was it Arena eventually, later on in the 80s. Now goes out twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday from 11 until 1. That became Last Orders. It was 11 till 2 for many years, then ended up as 11 till 1 in the 90s. Now it's not on anymore. Regular presenters Sally Osman and Bernard Mew are joined by Karen Myers and Tony Prideaux to bring you the informed opinion on matters of the moment. Your comments are welcome during the programme on 51030. Okay, so not 263568 that we had. For those not disposed to listen until such a late hour, I love this style of English and this is so prosaic, isn't it? There is another chance to hear parts of each edition on Sunday's weekend supplement from 11 until 1. The Arts, URE keeps you informed. Arts are well catered for in URE with 2 weekly programmes, Arts Forum and Wavelength. A look at past editions. The programme schedule reveals the Arts Forum to be one of URE's longest running programmes. Okay, at sea with URE. Religious broadcasting, that fell by the wayside. By the late 80s, the Christian community is not forgotten by URE either. Well, it was by 1989. Indeed, our half-hour weekly Christian news programme is also one of our longest-running programmes. What do you mean longest-running programmes? You've only been going for 4 years at the time. Campus Radio. The URE Audience Survey of 1980. Yeah. I think the editorial style of any publication had improved somewhat 10 years later. Anyway, okay. One of the questions most often asked about URE is how many people listen to it? I think 5 is normally the answer. URE was anxious to find out the answer to a rather different question, namely, what do people think of URE programs? On the way, we hoped to find out the size of our audience too, but it's not possible to make more of an educated guess. Why don't you just do a survey? Nationally, radio listeners in 1978-79 averaged 8 hours, 57 minutes a week per head of population, according to the 1980 edition of the BBC Handbook. The professionals have very sophisticated ways of finding out these things. The independent local radio stations have JICRA, the Joint Industry Committee for Radio Audience Research, which carried on for decades. The joint Since we're asking information, blah 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 blah. So what's the answer? After all, radio is about communication. It is. Right, who have we got? We have got Reveil Rock, Monday at 8. Start the working week with a bang, not a whimper. Literary, this radio station. Closes down at 10, then you play Radio 1 till 5. Then you've got early edition, including the daily feature, BBC local news. Yeah, so we had independent radio news. If you ever heard a great punk record called Amory Building, the B-side, it's an EP actually, it's got 4 tracks. One of them is called URE. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. Yeah, URE. Got to queue up BBC News at 10 to 6. Outlook, interesting oddities sent to URE by other stations and organisations. Really, did Radio Caroline used to send oddities to URE? No, that's some anorak. Is friends of the people at Radio Caroline. They've always been well connected, people at URE, expression. Then Credo, URE's weekly roundup of Christian news and views. Oh, I like the name Credo, very good. With Julie Smith and Jane Luscombe. Tim Rivet has excellent music, plus some competitions. I mean, he's hardly going to say rubbish music, is he? Competitions, yeah, how many people entered those? With generous prizes, all from one of URE's most professional DJs. That's damning with faint praise. Capriccio, classical music, an often surprising combination by Simon Foster. That name sounds familiar. Late Extra, Unwind. So that became Last Orders. Unwind after a hard day to soothing music chosen by Debbie Harrison and Belinda Ham. Closed down at 1 o'clock. Ian Slater, URE's treasurer, earns his keep. Very good with the breakfast show. All contributions are welcome. The early edition with Mark Bravery. Campers News Desk. Arts Forum, produced by Fiona Watson. James Vincent, Mr. Cool himself, with excellent jazz. By the early 90s, that was Jazz 963 with Simon Vigar. The Rubbery Brothers are stretched by an hour in response to public demands. George Daylight Poplar, Pete Rubbery. I think that was Cuthbert and Dibble, or Alas Smith and Borchard. 10 years later. Elaine Lawson experiments in the medium of radio, perhaps URE's most unusual programme. I would have listened to that. And then Midnight Magazine, an hour before midnight. Now broadcast twice weekly for the first time. See page 3 if you're a bit of a night owl. Devonshire House, Stocker Road. Phone number is 0392, no, not 01392 as it became, 51030. And seriously, you had 2 phone numbers, extension 230. Right, what else have we got? Breakfast. You see, 10 years later, it's just called The Morning After. Breakfast in a Broom Cupboard. Giles Alston, Elbows Aside. Adrian Pearce for a few weeks. About time too, if you ask me. Early edition with Mark Hawkins, including local news from the BBC at 10 to 6. Wooden music. John Whitworth explores our roots with a programme of folk music from Britain and around the world. Now, John Whitworth, later became known as Frog, was also on Devon Air stereo VHF for much of the 80s. He is the person, what was he, a lab technician from the biology department? We never really worked it out, but he called himself John the Frog, and he is the reason that there's still a radio station today, pretty much. Fiona Watson, I mean, his programme became Wednesdays, 7 till 9. Or was it 9 till 11? Anyway, the Frog Prog repeated on Saturdays. That was it, 7 till 9 on a Wednesday, recorded on quarter-inch tape at 3 3/4 inches per second, rebroadcast at 9 o'clock on the Saturday. Fiona Watson, the URE albums chart. I used to do that. Well, not the chart. I used to do a program called Album Tracking, tracks that you just didn't hear in the top 40. It's Tony Horn's idea, actually, that program. Used to love doing that. He did Campus Classics, which I thought was brilliant. Phil Buckingham, our thanks to the Left Bank the Left Bank Record Store. Where's that? Palestine? Left Bank Record Store, taken over by our price. Okay, station, We Funk. I would have loved this. URE turns into an all-soul and funk station under the guidance of Clifford Rennie. Charles McDougall. Charles gets you ready to face another day. Cheer up, it's nearly the end of the week. Early edition with Matthew Peacock, including the local news at 5:50. Vista, URE goes international. This will be around the world in 80 plays, which Tony presented for a year or two, and then I presented when he went off to Italy. URE goes international, reports and music from around the world. Plus a look back at the past week's main news stories through Swedish eyes. I'm an exchange student. Right, okay, BBC News at 7, then Wavelength, URE's new arts and current affairs programme, presented by Sophie Webster and Fiona Morrison. Square Chair, your chance to hear the week's new releases. Okay, that became a hit or miss with James Pearce, then taken over by yours truly. I did that for a year with co-hosted by Heather Gillis, with regulars like Alison Clavier and the other ones. Yeah, every week, James Pearce pioneered this. Every week you'd have a different society. I remember reviewing Smells Like Teen Spirit with somebody who dressed and lived as a punk. He absolutely loved it, loved that record. The rest of us thought it was rubbish when it came out. Of course, that launched the career of Nirvana, one of the biggest acts of the 90s. The 12-inch prog. Oh, I'd have listened to this. Love a good 12-inch. Rob Benton and Dave Irving, or Derek and Derek as they like to be known, present their favourite album tracks. Oh, they're not 12-inch. Oh, okay, yeah. The 12-inch single. You've got to be over the age of 40 to remember what a 12-inch single was. Or do you? Of course, now they're back in. Midnight Magazine, 11 o'clock. All kinds of issues discussed live and unscripted. This programme for controversial opinions. Phone them in on 51030. Then you've got Basil Towers, brilliant, bouncy, bizarre, bombastic, bumptious Basil before and after breakfast. Early edition of music start of the evening. The boring programme URE's look at the Guild national and international politics with contributions from the people who know. Now produced Charles Housen's Sports Special, 7:05 p.m. AU Chairman Trevor Russell at the helm. 40 minutes of news and music. Night Fever, Night Fever. Colin Parker gets you in the weekend mood with the best in disco and other music. Allegro, Simon Foster again with something a little different for his Monday programme. Oh, Allegro, okay. This is a great lineup. Late Extra, the uniquely entertaining Tim Williams with his late night requests. Phone in, again, 51030. And then Moonlight Serenade. Jazz. In the very early hours with Phil Levi. Of course, if you're less than 100 years old, you might not remember Moonlight Serenade. Serenade, rather, so I'm tired, was, it was this. Adrian McCarthy. Awake so soon? Start the weekend in the right mood with his request and chat show. Weekend supplement and news programme which gives you a second chance to hear recorded highlights. You see, this is why I'm not on the radio. I can't read. Not first thing in the morning. From midnight. Kevin Fryery. What better company could you have in the early afternoon? Well, I can think of a few people. You're the URE singles chart. Jane Dancer was URE's answer to Tony Blackburn. Now that is showing how old this is. URE's answer to Tony Blackburn. Yeah, that's who we were up against, because he presented the top 40 Sundays on Radio 1 from 5 till 7, which was Western Europe's most listened to programme. And they prided themselves on that fact, taken over by Simon Bates for a couple of years, then Mark Goodyear, I seem to recall. Those names may mean little to you. Of course, if you're 50-something, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Because we were all listening, and we were taping it on cassette every week. Well, I know I was. Right, Charles Elstub, Andy Robertson. I still don't know who any of these people are. And it's funny because URE has launched many broadcasting careers. I'm sure some of these people did go into radio or TV or production. It says 2 hours of pretentious, unfashionable music, which is very difficult to dance to. And he's quite right. That's the kind of programme I would have enjoyed. Keith Bailey and Paul Bethel. Is this a Southwesterner taking over URE? URE's Exeter's dynamic lawyers are quite unstoppable. Late Extra with Alan Harper, including whose taste inclines to blues. I could never be a newsreader. Paul Backhouse. Yes, it's him again. Who? Paul will have you out of bed in no time. Yeah, because you want to turn the radio off and go out. Richard Simpson. The best of new releases are reviewed, and Richard also features some excellent oldies. Great. Now up against URE was Radio 1 with Round Table with Janice Long, who I seem to remember Tony was going to write a book about her, or help her write her autobiography as a ghostwriter. Right, Tim Arnold, Exeter's top disco DJ. Tim Arnold, I know who that is. I've heard of him. Yes, he went on to great things. Disc spinning talents, URE for 2 hours. And don't miss this week's best prizes given away on the accumulator. Oh, here we go. It did exist back then. The Frog Prog was Saturdays at 3:30. All sorts of everything, but that didn't change, including a review of a classic album you can win. And the Frog, he calls himself the Frog, supervises as the old student has a go on radio. Sorry, it's the odd student has a go on radio. Oh, okay, so this is baptism of fire. Invite them in the studio, give them a microphone, and they're live. Actually, he was a brilliant trainer. He was amazing. I can do a whole feature on him sometime. Right, adult-oriented rock. Well, that was a technical term used by the professional radio stations. AOR. Were people talking about AOR back in 1980? Well, obviously were. Adult-oriented rock, presented in a beautiful Newton Abbot accent. Is there such a thing as a beautiful Newton Abbot? I think they're being sarcastic here. Patrick Scab Cunningham. Ah, the Scabs. Yes. He was in the band, the Scabs, punk band that released URE and Amory Building. Discretion FM, your guide to the finer music, presented by URE's best known DJ. Who? URE's best known DJ was a legend in his own lunchtime. Oh, that's where that phrase came from. The legend in his own lunchtime. Terence Black. Late editor of Beautiful Records around midnight. Yeah, CD hadn't come out yet. That didn't happen until 1982. Information. Our transmitters are remotely controlled and have to be turned on by a test tone prior to each period of transmission. That Frog wrote this. The tone sounds for 3 minutes. The transmitters switch off automatically after we close down. What's on and anything goes. URE reaches more people more quickly than any other campus medium. So, if you want free publicity or society events, films, discos, yes, they still use the word disco. They hadn't invented the word nightclub at the time. Any other happenings, drop in and let us know. And if your message is one of more general nature, maybe you're buying or selling, wanting a lift or a house, just sending a personal message. This is great. Then URE can be your speaking notice board. Why weren't we doing this 10 years later? Call in any weekday lunchtime. You know the number, 2635, no, it's 551030. Extension, or 779911, extension 230. Right, in focus. URE's station manager, Terence Black, looks at a few of the station's non-radio activities. In the 1980s, University Radio Exeter must become more conscious of its role, both within the university and the general community. It's regrettable that in the past URE has been largely inward-looking. To some extent, this was inevitable during the station's early days, but now URE is established as fully operational. Indeed, I'm going to re-record this. This is great stuff.